My dad always said that going to NYU was a good idea, but he never specified what opportunities it would open for me. I often wonder if someone might be waiting behind those doors. The burden of student debt looms large, and it feels like a long stretch of bad decisions is taking its toll. The weight of my student loans is crushing, especially as I remember the moment I changed my tassel, signifying my transition into adulthood. I graduated with six-figure debt, and every job rejection feels like another nail in my financial coffin. It's been 4 months since I last spoke to you. I walked across the stage to receive my business administration degree, convinced that the world was about to open up for me. My parents moved from Shanghai to Queens 25 years ago with nothing but dreams and determination. They worked 18-hour days at their restaurant so that I could have opportunities they never had. Knowledge is the key, my mother would say, while counting tips late at night. She always encouraged me to study hard, go to a good school, and secure a good job. I followed her advice meticulously, graduating at the top of my high school class and gaining admission to New York University's Stern School of Business. I maintained a 3.9 GPA while juggling internships and part-time work, even starting a successful business club in college. The path seemed clear: graduate, land a job at one of the big consulting firms, and make my parents proud. But then reality hit. I submitted 237 job applications, had 83 interviews, and received 0 offers. Employers were looking for someone with more experience, or they informed me that the positions had been filled internally. Despite my impressive skills, the polite rejections kept coming. Meanwhile, the loan payments loomed ever closer, and my savings from working at the school bookstore dwindled. I moved from my shared room in Brooklyn to a tiny studio in Washington Heights, a place where even the roaches seemed to pay rent, and the heater only worked when it felt like it. My parents offered to let me move back home, but the thought of returning to my childhood bedroom above the kitchen, filled with the smell of soy sauce and loss, was almost worse than the debt itself. That's how I found myself scrolling through job ads at 3 a.m., the blue light of my laptop illuminating a stack of past due notices. Most of the ads were typical entry-level traps: commission-only sales jobs, pyramid scams disguised as entrepreneurial opportunities, and unpaid internships requiring 5 years of experience. Then, I stumbled upon an ad buried between listings for dog walkers and personal assistants. Night cleaner needed, Morgan Grace Building. $70 per hour, immediate start, no skills necessary. Must be detail-oriented and able to follow steps precisely. Night shift only, 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. Contact hiring at morgangracebuilding.com. The pay seemed like a mistake. $70 an hour for cleaning. That was lawyer's money, not maid's money. But despair has a way of suspending disbelief, so I sent in my application, not expecting a response. To my surprise, the reply came within minutes, despite it being the middle of the night. Dear Monsieur Chen, your application has been accepted. Please report to the Morgan Grace Building tonight at 11:45 p.m. sharp. Bring nothing but yourself. Everything will be provided. One question: are you good at following directions? Regards, HR Department, Morgan Grace Building. I had never heard of the Morgan Grace Building, which was strange considering my 4 years of studying business in Manhattan. A quick Google search yielded nothing, No website, no reviews, no news articles. Just a street address in Midtown and a single black and white photo that looked like it was from the 1950s. The logical part of my brain screamed that this was sketchy. There was no interview, no background check. But when you're staring down $180,000 in student loans, rationality takes a backseat to necessity. I arrived at the spot exactly at 11:45 p.m. The building rose before me like a monument to corporate excess. 60 stories of glass and steel vanishing into the low clouds, its windows reflecting the city lights in a way that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Most of the surrounding buildings were dark, but here and there, lights flickered in patterns that made my eyes hurt if I looked too long. The revolving door moved quietly, too quietly for something made of glass and steel. As I stepped through, the noise of the city disappeared completely. It wasn't muffled, but rather erased, as if someone had hit a universal mute button. The only sounds were the soft buzzing of electric lights and something else, perhaps a whisper or the building's air system having a conversation with itself. The lobby was a study in corporate cleanliness, featuring all white marble and metal that seemed polished beyond normal limits. The security desk dominated the space, but something about it triggered my architect father's voice in my head. Bad design causes unease. The human mind knows when measurements are wrong. The desk was too high, its sides slightly off, as if it had been built for someone or something not quite human. Behind it sat Mr. Kane. At least that's what his nameplate said, though the letters seemed to rearrange themselves when I wasn't looking directly at them. He appeared old, but not just old. Ancient, like something that had been there since the building's foundation was laid. His outfit looked like it belonged in a black and white photograph from the building's early days. The fabric faded and shaped in ways that shifted when I tried to focus on them. His hands, when he pushed the clipboard across the desk, were pale and papery, with too many knuckles. "You're the new cleaner," he said, his voice carrying an echo that didn't match the acoustics of the entrance. "Right on time. They like that," he added. "They?" I asked, but he ignored my question, instead tapping the clipboard with one long finger. "Sign here, initial here and here, blood type here, favorite method of contact in case of transfer here," he instructed, smoothly adjusting the paperwork. The forms looked normal at first glance. Typical job contracts, risk waivers, non-disclosure agreements. But the text seemed to shift when I tried to read the fine print. The words moved themselves into lines that made my head hurt. One line read, "Employee hereby acknowledges that linear time is a corporate construct. In the event of temporal removal or existential reassignment, the company reserves the right to change reality as needed." As I signed, I noticed something strange about the papers. Secret text seemed to appear and disappear depending on how the bright lights hit the page. I tilted the clipboard slightly, and there they were, rules written in what looked like disappearing ink. Cleaning staff standards. Rule 1, clean the buildings in the exact order listed on the plan. Do not skip any. Deviation breaks the pattern. They notice disruptions. Rule 2, if an office door is locked, skip it and return in exactly 17 minutes. Not 16, not 18. They count the seconds. Rule 3, avoid looking straight into any reflective objects after midnight. Rule 4, if the lift stops at the 13th floor, do not exit. close the doors immediately and keep pressing the button until it moves. Rule 5. If you hear your name, do not react. Rule 6. The water coolers must stay unplugged after 2 a.m. Rule 7. If you hear typing from an empty office, do not examine it. They're writing your resignation letter. Rule 8. All trash must be disposed of in reverse alphabetical order. The bins get hungry if you mix them up. The rules continued, but they dimmed before I could read them all. When I looked up to ask Kane about them, he seemed to have vanished, leaving me alone with the clipboard and a growing sense of unease. He was gone. The guard desk looked different somehow, older, dustier, as if it had been abandoned for years. I started on the 20th floor as instructed. The elevator ride was unnervingly smooth, with no sense of movement at all. When the doors opened, I was hit by a wall of silence. Not just quiet, but a total absence of sound that made my ears ring. The floor was exactly what you'd expect from a high-rise office building. Endless cubicles, glass-walled meeting rooms, and corner offices with impressive views of the city. But something felt off. The cubicle walls seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them, and the distance between offices appeared to stretch and shrink as I walked. I pulled out my cleaning cart and checked the plan. First up was conference room 20A, simple enough. But as I walked toward it, I noticed something strange about my reflection in the glass walls. It wasn't matching my movements exactly. There was a slight pause, like a video feed with lag. Sometimes, when I turned quickly, I could have sworn my reflection looked happy when I wasn't. The meeting room itself was immaculate, which was odd considering it was meant to need cleaning. The whiteboard was completely blank except for a single dot in the center that seemed to follow my movements. The chairs were all pushed in at precisely the same angle around the table, and a single pen lay perfectly parallel to the edge. As I wiped down the table, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The distinct sound of a chair pushing back from the table. But when I turned around, all the chairs were still in place. Just my imagination, I told myself, trying to dismiss the stress of being alone in a strange building. Then I noticed condensation forming on the window, words appearing as if someone were writing them from the other side. You missed a spot. Against my better judgment, I pressed my ear to the door. The typing stopped, quickly replaced by the sound of chair wheels rolling across the carpet, getting closer to the door. Then I heard a voice, barely a whisper. "Sophie, we've been expecting you." I stumbled away from the door, my heart pounding. The typing resumed, now sounding like multiple keyboards, all slightly out of sync, creating a chorus of clicks and clacks that seemed to follow me down the hallway. At exactly 12 a.m., all the lights on the floor dimmed simultaneously. The glowing tubes hummed at a lower frequency, casting shadows that didn't quite match the objects casting them. My phone's screen flickered and died, even though it had been fully charged. I needed to move to the next floor, but the thought of getting into the elevator filled me with dread. Still, the plan was clear. 21st floor and next. Rule 1 echoed in my mind. Clean the buildings in the exact order listed. Do not skip any. The lift arrived with a soft ding that sounded almost musical. Too musical, like someone humming a tune slightly off-key. As I stepped inside, I noticed the buttons were placed incorrectly. The numbers weren't in order, and some were repeated. Then I saw it. Between floors 12 and 14, a button marked 13 that I could have sworn wasn't there before. The climb was smooth until we passed the 12th floor, at which point the elevator shuddered and stopped. The display flickered between numbers before settling on 13. My stomach dropped as the doors began to slide open. The hallway beyond was wrong in ways I couldn't quite process. It stretched incredibly far, the walls covered in what looked like old-fashioned wallpaper that moved and swirled in shapes that hurt my eyes. The bright lights flickered in sequence, giving the illusion of movement, as if the hallway were alive. I remembered Rule 4 and lunged for the close door button, but before the doors could shut completely, I heard rapid footsteps coming from the darkness, accompanied by the sound of something being dragged. A voice, distorted but unmistakably calling my name, beckoned, "Sophie, join us in accounting." The doors finally closed, cutting off the voice mid-sentence. The elevator continued its ascent, but now I could hear weak whispers coming from the speakers that usually played music. If I focused, I could make out fragments of conversation echoing through the elevator speakers. "Her paperwork is almost ready. Just needs to sign in triplicate. Permanent job available." When I reached the 22nd floor, my cleaning plan had changed again. New buildings had been added, written in that same wet ink that never seemed to dry. One entry caught my eye. "Office 2213 must be cleaned when the time is right." I found 2213 locked, but my watch showed it was time. Exactly 17 minutes had passed. The door opened smoothly, revealing a perfectly preserved office from what looked like the 1950s. An old typewriter sat on the desk, the paper in it still moving as if someone had just finished typing. I approached carefully and read the words on the page. "Notice of permanent employment employee. Sophie Chen, job, night shift, eternal. Start date, tonight, end date, never." The paper was topped with a post-it note that read simply, "You're next." The typewriter began moving on its own, keys hitting the paper with sharp steel clicks. "We see you. Read the offer letter. Welcome to the team. Your orientation begins now." I backed away from the desk, knocking over a cup of pens. When they hit the floor, instead of spreading, they aligned themselves into an arrow pointing at the office's large window. Beyond the glass, the city lights seemed wrong. Buildings were in the wrong places, some moving slowly across the skyline like ships at sea. It was after midnight now, and Rule 3 burned in my mind. Avoid looking straight into any reflective surfaces. But in an office building made of glass and metal, that was nearly impossible. Every window, every computer screen, every smooth surface seemed to hold movement just at the edge of my vision. I made the mistake of looking at the window. My reflection stood there, but it wasn't mirroring my actions. It was totally still, head tilted at an impossible angle, laughing with too many teeth. Behind it, I could see other reflections emerging from the darkness. Office workers in outdated clothes, their movements jerky and wrong, like marionettes with twisted strings. I fled to the bathroom, forgetting in my panic that it would be full of mirrors. The moment I pushed open the door, I saw them. Dozens of versions of myself reflected infinitely in the mirrors, each one slightly different. Some wore old-fashioned cleaning clothes, others, business suits from different decades. All of them wore that same terrible smile. One reflection stepped forward, pressing against the glass as if it were a thin sheet. The mirror's surface swirled like water, and a hand, my hand, but wrong, with too many joints, began to reach through. I threw my cleaning rag at the mirror in fear. The glass broke, but instead of falling, the shards hung in the air. Each piece contained a tiny version of myself, all moving separately, all trying to crawl out of their glass jails. Their whispers filled the room. Stay with us. The benefits package is to die for. We need someone with your qualifications. The cleaning plan in my hand had changed again. Now every page was filled with the same task repeated endlessly. Clean office 1313 on floor 13. Clean office 1313 on floor 13. Clean room 1313 on floor 13. At the bottom, in fresh ink that dripped like blood, failure to complete assigned chores will result in immediate and permanent reassignment. The lift arrived without being called. When the doors opened, all the chairs from the building were inside, arranged in a circle, all facing outward. They rocked slightly, as if recently vacated. A nameplate had appeared on each one. Different versions of Sophie Chen, night shift supervisor, with dates starting from 1950 to 2023. My watch read 3:15 a.m. The final rule had appeared on my schedule. Leave the house by 3:33 a.m. Failure to leave will result in permanent employment. The elevator seemed to move in slow motion, each floor taking longer to pass than the last. The numbers on the display flickered randomly, occasionally showing impossible floors. -13, square, TK of 16, infinity. The office chairs continued their gentle rocking, the nameplates changing every time I blinked, each new version of me staring back with that same sinister smile. I blinked at 3:28 a.m. The lift shuddered to a halt between floors. The lights flickered, and in the brief moments of darkness, I could see them. Countless former coworkers pressed against the elevator walls, their bodies twisted as if they'd been flattened into the metal. Their whispers surrounded me. Your resume is so impressive. We offer an excellent retirement plan. The night shift is forever. I pried open the elevator doors, finding myself facing a darkened hallway. The emergency lights cast a pale green glow that made the stairs look like they were moving, rippling like waves in a dark ocean. As I started down, I heard the unique sound of dress shoes on metal, hundreds of feet falling in perfect synchronization, always just a few flights above me. 3:30 a.m. The stairs seemed endless. Each time I looked up or down, the climbing stairs stretched infinitely in both directions. Signs for different stories made no sense. Floor 7 and A2. Floor ? Floor yesterday. Behind me, the footsteps grew closer. 3:31 a.m. The walls began to sweat, something that looked like paint. Droplets formed into company memos and job reviews as they ran down the walls. My name was on all of them, along with employment dates covering decades I hadn't lived through. 3:32 a.m. I finally burst into the hallway, but it had changed. The modern decor was gone, replaced by a bizarre mix of office styles from every decade of the building's life. Mr. Kane's security desk had multiplied. Now there were dozens of them arranged in a maze, each manned by a version of him from a different age. The exit was locked. Through the glass doors, I could see the city outside, but it looked wrong. Buildings bent at impossible angles, streets closing in on themselves like a Mobius strip. My watch showed 3:33 a.m., and I felt something change in the air, like truth was solidifying around me. Then I saw it, the faint glow of an emergency exit sign, its letters rearranging themselves continuously. Exit, exist, exile, enter. Breaking every rule I'd been given, I ran for it. The building groaned, the floor rippling under my feet, as if I were running on liquid glass. The emergency door felt heavier than it should have, as if the building itself was trying to hold it shut. As I pushed against it, I heard a sound, like tearing paper, the barrier between realities ripping apart. The steps beyond stretched down into infinite darkness, but I didn't hesitate. I ran. Behind me, the building's voice, 1,000 whispers merged into one, called out, "Your 2 weeks' notice has been denied." I walked onto the street at exactly 3:34 a.m., falling onto the sidewalk. The night air had never tasted sweeter. When I looked back, the Morgan Grace building looked completely normal, just another glass tower rising into the sky. A man in an expensive suit walked past, giving me an odd look. He entered through the rotating door as if nothing was wrong. For a moment, I caught his reflection in the glass. It stayed outside, watching me, smiling that too wide smile. I threw away my work schedule, watching as the paper folded itself into a paper crane and flew away. I swore never to return, not for any pay. But the building had other plans. When I got home, my room had changed. The layout was slightly off. The furniture was placed like an office waiting room. My bedroom door had a nameplate, Sophie Chen, remote worker. My laptop was open, showing a new email. Dear Ms. Chen, due to your outstanding work during the trial period, we are pleased to offer you a permanent job with our organization. The Morgan Grace building believes in a flexible work setting. If you won't come to the office will come to you. Your home office has already been set up according to company specifications. Please note that all shiny surfaces are now company land, and your reflection has been moved to the night shift. Welcome to the team. Sincerely, Human Resources, Floor 13. In my bathroom mirror, my image waved at me, even though my hand was still. It was wearing a company badge I'd never owned, and behind it, I could see an office stretching into infinity. Sometimes late at night, I hear typing coming from my room, performance reviews slipping under my door, judging jobs I haven't done yet. My kitchen has a water cooler now. I keep it unplugged, but every morning at 2 a.m., I hear it bubbling. The Morgan Grace building doesn't let go of its employees easily, and somewhere in that maze of glass and steel, in an office that appears in all times at once, there's a desk with my name on it, waiting